We all know success isn't a formula, it's an endeavor. This channel is about talking business with small business owners around the world who are willing to share their stories. Right, morning Yu-san, hi.
Good morning, Mark.
Hi. You have a very interesting history because you were formerly working for some banks in the asset management business, and then you started out on your own, and that's where we met. So you set up a new company called Bridge Rock Consulting.
I bridge people with different needs. And it happens to be mostly in the asset management finance industry. But for the record, I do not give advice. I do not do any of the legal, regulatory, licensed activities.
When we're talking about bridging, how do you explain to us a little bit more about this bridging?
Bridging can be in a lot of forms. Maybe because I'm Japanese and I speak Japanese, a lot of times it includes Japanese and English. But it also could be geographical. It also could be different industries or the combination of all three. So a typical one could be an investor is looking for an investment, an investment is looking for an investor. I do not give advice, but I can introduce. So depending on the need and depending on what's available, I might be able to introduce two parties together, help them facilitate the discussion and do whatever transaction they would like to do.
I see. All right. Why did you start this business about a year ago?
It was because of COVID and business travel became restricted for everybody. And there were some friends and contacts globally who asked me to be the representative here in Asia because they couldn't do business travel. That was the origin where the European, American, Middle East contacts asked me to be a go-to person to speak with some of their counterparties in Asia. But then the reverse happened. Some of the Asian ones wanted to contact overseas who they did not have, or outside the Asian region who did not have the contacts and asked me to help that. And then some of them are inter-region. So a Singaporean asking me to help a Singaporean, which is where, Mark, you come in.
So actually, there is a lot of demand and supply issues. So, from my perspective, SMEs have a problem looking for financiers. That is an acute issue that most SMEs suffer. And I understand from your industry, right, from the financier's point of view, investor's point of view, the difficulty is looking for good SMEs to invest in. Is that correct?
I think the challenge for capital for SME is not just a Singapore problem or Southeast Asian problem, but a global problem that also exists in the United States, America, and Europe as well. And you're correct, Mark, to point out that from the provider of the capital's perspective, how do you identify somebody that is worth either lending or investing? It could be loans or debt, or it could be equity capital. Either way, identifying somebody that they want to put their money in is difficult because, relatively speaking, I'm going to generalize, but the paperwork that's required to give a $100 million loan and a $100,000 loan is not that different.
Yes.
Plus, if you are a small and mid-sized company, then the assets or the trustworthiness or the name brand recognition, all these things are going to be a challenge. Some people think that's an opportunity. So banks could come in and lend, or some alternative lending funds or platforms, which is something that's relatively new, can come and lend.
It's interesting what you say about the paperwork, because I've read somewhere, and there is a massive research. They say one of the problems between SMEs, lenders and investors is this thing known as information asymmetry. That means from the lenders or investors' point of view, in order to manage their risk, they are looking at more information, looking at documents, and they are wanting to have basically a lot of hygiene and reporting. But from the SME's point of view, the SMEs find that this paperwork is a big of a problem. And why are the banks and why are the investors asking for so much paperwork? And so the two never actually gel, right? So are you familiar whether there are people in between, like yourself, maybe you have worked in a bank before, helping the SMEs with this paperwork to sort of like get the paperwork ready in the language of the financiers, so that when they are applying for a certain loan or they are applying for certain capital, they will be able to present their case in a proper form that the lenders are looking, say, to do.
I don't do it myself as a business, but I do know that there are people in different parts of the world that will help small and mid-sized companies obtain grants from governments. And they will create the documentation, apply to the government.
Right.
And when the grant is provided to the companies, they will take a cut. So there is a business out there that does that. I also know a fund that's in Europe that uses a government facility program where the government is going to buy something from a small and mid-sized lender. And because it's the government, it takes time for the money to come in. So this fund will buy the invoices from the small and mid-sized company at a discount and give them the cash. And because the counterparty is the government, it's deemed low risk.
So from what I'm hearing you say, your expertise is this. You are you are able to help the SMEs decipher and understand what the funders are looking at, and from their perspective. Am I right?
I would try to understand what both parties would like to say.
Okay.
And I would like to understand what both parties is trying to convey as a message. And if there is something that's missing, I'll ask one party to say, well, this party wants to understand this part. Could you explain a little bit? And vice versa. And that could be usually in English or English in general.
Yeah. So maybe for the sake of our listeners, we did a project with a commodity business. Perhaps if you can explain your role in that project.
Yeah, the project was given from you, Mark. There were two parties involved. There was a buyer and a seller of a commodity. Between the buyer and the seller, there was a need for financing. So what we collectively try to do with the buyer and the seller is to understand the nature of the business, what the commodity is, where is it going to be sitting, and then to supplement, because of these two entities were relatively small and short history, use a trust structure so that the lender will feel more comfortable with the with a Singapore structure, trust structure, because of the legal protection that it provides. And we went out to see if there were any takers or some discussions that could be made.
You sit on the crossroads between Asia and Europe, because I think you spend quite a lot of time before coming here, you were mentioning in Europe as well. Am I right? Yeah. And give us an understanding of, say, what is the difference between Asia and the Europeans when it comes to this issue of finance?
I think Europe is diverse as well. So if you go to UK and you compare it to, say, Romania, they're both Europe, but it's not the same thing. Asia as well, Singapore and Indonesia, are geographically very close, it's not the same thing.
Yes.
But to generalize Europe as more of the developed Europe, like the France, Italy, Spain, UK, they have a banking system that's very well established with a history, and you can go to a bank, you can deposit, you can borrow from a bank. Is it easy to do that? That's a different topic, but it's there. Whereas in Asia, maybe Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, there are many countries, regions that are still developing. The economy is growing very fast, whereas the banking system is not growing that fast because it takes time to gradually build up the network and so on and so forth. So there is a gap because you have people who would like to do business if I had the money to create this, and that, and sell it to somebody or provide a service to somebody. But because of the lack of capital, they can't start. The first step is done. And that's where these alternative lending schemes come in and try to provide capital to service that need. And we're seeing a lot of those here in Asia.
And would you say that a lot of activities happen in Singapore, in Asia, or does it happen a lot in Japan or in other places in Asia?
Japan is a very different place with a different problem. They're getting old. The Japanese sell more diapers for adults than children, and that's going on for more than 10 years. And so that's a different problem that they have. And they have a very good banking system. They're probably overbanked. Here in Asia, there are companies that would provide the services that we discussed in Singapore, as well as Philippines, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Vietnam. And it's growing. Everybody has a different business model. Some will lend to individuals who have a periodic salary or payment. Some will just do invoice. Some will do trade finance. Some will do a combination of all. There's always a business for lending against a motorcycle or a car. So those are things that you can find in this part of the world.
Thank you for today's information. And I think we've learned quite a bit and saw the inside of your business. So thank you, Yu-san.